to the CNBC TV 18 special. I'm Shereen, Bhan. We're pretty much right outside the MMRDA grounds in the financial capital. The MMRDA grounds playing host to the Make in India Mega Week. Joining us today is the Prime Minister of Sweden. Sweden, of course, has come for the Make in India Week with one of the largest business delegations. Prime Minister, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. You said yesterday, while you were addressing the audience and the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, that the world's focus has shifted away from China to India and that all eyes are on India today. What's changed about India, to your mind, to get this kind of attention?
Well, India is going through a dramatic development in its economy. Growing, India will be the largest country in the world in a few years. It is the world's largest democracy. So it's a development that is attracting a lot of the world's view.
Okay, so let me ask you what that means then for Sweden in specific, because you're here with the largest business delegation. Swedish companies have been operating in India for a while now. In fact, we have about 1,200 companies registered in India. But if I were to look at the numbers as far as exports and imports are concerned, or bilateral trade, it is still subpar. I mean, there's a lot of promise and potential, but we haven't been able to achieve that. In fact, the numbers for this year are lower than what we saw in FY12, for instance. Why do you see that gap, and why do you believe that we haven't been able to capitalize on the full potential yet?
Well, first, as you point out, the Swedish companies have been present in Sweden for many years. Ericsson since 1903. And we do employ, Swedish companies employ some 160,000 people in India. Well, what is happening, I think, is that while you, let's say a company put up a plant in India, they do export, so they export from India, but it's not necessarily only to Sweden, of course.
Sure.
So they export in this region, but they export worldwide. So that is how the global economy actually is functioning. I see the possibility of increasing trade between India and Sweden, of course. But I think the most important thing now is that the Indian economy is growing. And we want to be a part of that, Sweden, and we do know that we can deliver very good services and products. So we have a huge possibility.
So in terms of the government-to-government partnership or government-to-government participation, when you talk about Sweden wanting to participate in India's transformation, what is that going to mean exactly? In your conversation with the Prime Minister, for instance, what can we expect now on the bilateral front? What independent companies do, that will depend on their strategy, not just for India, but for the world. So that's aside. But on a government-to-government basis, what can we actually expect in terms of outcomes?
We, both governments, of course, want to support this cooperation between our companies, the enterprises, because we both know that we need manufacturing of goods and services in order to have a good welfare also in our countries. So I think the support, but also the view that we have so many areas in which we can cooperate. Let's take smart cities, for an example. The environmental change is a risk for the whole world. We need to address it. When two governments, two countries cooperate and with a focus on creating a much better environment for our kids and our youth, that is a very important cooperation.
And that's a speciality of Sweden. So have you identified the cities that you would like to partner with? We've already seen France and the US put down the cities that they will partner with the Indian government to build smart cities. But have you identified cities that you would like to partner the government with?
That is now up to the Indian society and the companies that are present here, and all the also the authorities, the Swedish authorities, that can be of assistance. That need to be addressed, of course, to be detailed, to be decided. But I think smart cities, the green technology in general, infrastructure, water, and all these things that means a lot to people in their daily life, we can do a lot to improve.
Again, coming back to bilateral dialogue and the conversation that you've had with the Prime Minister, the defence sector is seen as the big area of opportunity. I know that Saab has expressed its interest in being able to participate much more in India's defence space, perhaps even try and, take the Gripen project forward here in India if the Indian government were to be open to that idea. Has there been any conversation on any specific project within the defense sector, for instance?
We identify that the defense sector is important. It's important to India. It's up to India, of course, to decide what they want, how they want to develop its defense forces. But we are ready, both Saab as a company and the Swedish government, we are ready to go through with that, to develop those thoughts. And I know that the Gripen project, we have a fantastic fighter aircraft. It's very competitive. So whatever we can do to handle that in a good way, we want to do that.
Has there been any conversation in this particular visit on this specific issue at all?
Not in detail, no, of course not. But we have stated clearly that we are ready. So if India decides to do so, we are ready and we are there.
Okay, let me ask you about what you're seeing as far as the global economic context is concerned. And in fact, I want to pick up on a quote that, and you know, I think you said this a couple of months ago, that Sweden is facing some of the biggest challenges that it's seen in modern times. There is, of course, the crisis in schools, there's the high unemployment, and there's the refugee crisis. You've been forced to close your borders, and you did that in November of last year, given the kind of influx that we saw on the immigrant front. How challenging is the economic scenario for you, particularly in Sweden and as well as the rest of Europe, and what does that mean then as far as the global outlook is concerned?
Of course, it is a huge challenge. This migration crisis is the biggest we have seen since the Second World War. 60 million people are refugees, either within the country or outside the country. So it is a huge human tragedy that we are witnessing right now. And of course, many people also come to Sweden, and we had to take measures to decrease the number. We haven't closed the borders, but we did decrease dramatically because it was absolutely necessary to do that. But my point is that the European Union as a whole, European Union with 28 member countries, some 500 million inhabitants, we could cope with this challenge. So my focus is now to make sure that 28 member countries all the countries take their responsibilities. That the
But do you feel confident and optimistic of that happening?
It's going too slow, way too slow. But we will discuss it next week again and in March. And the Commission, I believe, is preparing some proposals. We need to act now. And now we need to act also in cooperation with Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, of course, to help support people in Syria, because the first thing we want to do is to prevent people from having to take these huge risks as they are doing. But there will be people also coming to Europe, of course, and when that happens, we need to cooperate, all the 28 member countries.
Are you going to be forced to change your position as far as allowing immigrants in, or your action on the immigration policy is concerned, given the fact that it's probably costing you politically within Sweden today?
We have changed our policy. That we're right now changing the policy. So we introduced ID controls, for example, at our borders, and we are changing the policy right now. To have the same standard that Europe has, the European Union minimum standard, of course respecting the right to seek asylum. That is a human right. It is a global right. So we will respect that, but we are reducing our level, yes.
But what does all of this mean then as far as the Swedish economy is concerned? Because if I were to look at the numbers, the GDP growth in 2015 about 3.6%. The expectation as per the EU Commission is that it will go down to about 3.2% in 2016 and 2.9% in 2017. Unemployment numbers are high, expected to be about 6.9% in 2016. What could be the drivers now as far as your economic policy are concerned?
Well, first, it's important to see that we do have the growth is not bad. I mean, 3.5 or 3, close to 3.
In comparison to the rest of Europe, yes.
Exactly, exactly. And what is happening right now is that unemployment is going down. In total, for youth, for people coming from other countries, the unemployment is going down. The employment is going up. So we need to use this momentum right now to invest even more. Yes, there was a situation last fall that we couldn't cope with that because the increase of immigrants was so dramatic. It happened over 3 months, and that we need to handle. But in general, of course, it's good for a country also when people come to your country, because we are happy that the country is growing. It is a challenge. We need to build much more. We need to increase the housing. We need to do much more on infrastructure, on schools.
So
we need many teachers. But at the same time, it is a positive challenge that we are growing. More kids, more young people coming to the people with experiences and knowledge from other countries, which we need in a global economy. But we couldn't handle that dramatic situation. And that we dealt with. We have taken the decision that was necessary. And now we will make sure that people that actually stays in Sweden, that they are given the best possibilities to take part of the building of our society.
You know, you were talking about the government having to spend more on things like infrastructure in a way to try and stimulate the economy, and that's a challenge and a dilemma that the government here in India is also dealing with and grappling with. Do you feel that it will largely be government spending for you in Sweden as well to try and stimulate growth?
Yes, and because it's important because a society needs to function, we need to be able to send goods all over the country and out of the country. People need to go to work, so we need trains and transportation facilities in different ways, and that is again something that is positive. And that is also why we have decided as government not to stop the tax cutting policy and go in for, and actually go for investment. We need investment in infrastructure, in housing, in education, training for adults, those kind of investment, and also in our welfare system.
You know, one of the other things that Sweden does, and the government in Sweden specifically, is that it spends a significant amount of money or a higher degree of your budget on R&D and innovation in comparison to other countries. How important has that been in order for Sweden to be able to leverage the sort of brand that you now enjoy and the pricing power that these companies enjoy as well?
It's very important. R&D is crucial, but not only R&D, and we have to be aware now that the most of the R&D is being done in the companies. So we need to have a right mixture of R&D resources from the society and the companies. We will this autumn we'll present a new policy, the coming strategy for R&D. Another thing that is important, though, is innovation, because it's one thing to invent new products,
sure,
but you need to be able to put it on the market as well. So innovation is more even perhaps more important, not more important, is as important as R&D, and that is why I introduced a new National Innovation Council that I lead myself. I share those meetings. We discuss with business leaders, with academia, with civil society. How do we develop Sweden in the best way in terms of infrastructure, but also education and digitalization and other issues.
Did you have any conversation with Prime Minister Modi? Because this is an area of interest for him as well. He's launched the startup policy here in India on a national front as well. Was there any conversation with him on this?
Yeah, we both share this focus and this interest, and we both see the same challenges and opportunities. Absolutely. So I also invited people that are interested in India to come to Sweden also. We can continue that dialogue on innovation especially. Yes, I think we can cooperate on that.
You know, since we're talking about Make in India and the opportunity for Swedish companies in India, all the big brands are here, whether it's IKEA, H&M, Volvo, so on and so forth. And there's been an annual business confidence survey that's been done of Swedish companies operating in India. I think it's been on for about the last 5 or 6 years, perhaps even longer. And while the trend in general has been positive, this year it shows a decline as far as business confidence is concerned. In your conversation with your business delegation, have they raised any specific issues about the operating environment in India and what they would like addressed in terms of government action from India?
No, I think when you do this service, you from time to time you see, of course, you see changes. It doesn't have to be dramatic. I believe that companies, I know that companies, enterprises, when they look at investments, for example, of course they explore different realities. It could be education, training, could be taxes, could be tariffs, could be different things that they add all this into a total picture of the possibility of making an investment. No, they haven't complained about something special, and I leave that to the companies and the local politicians and politicians in India, of course, to deal with that. But in general, we do agree, both the Prime Minister and me, that we have so many possibilities, and we will cooperate in different ways.
Let me ask you a question that perhaps you can give us an insight into. What is it like to run a coalition government in Sweden? In India, we've had not a very good experience of running coalition governments. We finally got a majority government here under Prime Minister Modi. But how challenging is it to run a coalition government, particularly in the difficult times that we just talked about?
Well, there's even another challenge in Sweden, because it's a coalition government, but still in minority. Well, of course, with different parties, but we have decided on the long-term view what we want to do. What is it we want to achieve? We want to reduce unemployment. We want to raise skills. We want to improve the education for our kids and our youth. We want to change the climate change. We want to attack that climate change and make sure that our kids will have a good environment when they grow up. Those are the things that we focus on, and along the road we solve the problem. But, I mean, of course.
How closely are you watching the poll numbers at this point in time, which seem to suggest that that the opposition party is gaining in strength?
Well, the poll number, of course, I see them, but I can't be stressed of that. We have 4 years now to make a difference. We have shifted now the policy in Sweden from just tax cuts and reducing in the welfare system, privatizing. That is not the answer for Sweden. We have shifted now. We are investing in jobs, in schools, in the welfare system, in infrastructure, in housing. We're expanding, we're developing the country. So I'm confident that this is what Sweden needs. This is the right path for Sweden. We're taking that path. So
what is the role of the private sector that you see in government?
Sorry?
What is the role then of the private sector that you see in this plan of yours? And, government and private sector participation, because once again, that is an issue that India is grappling with as well, that, what should be the right model of the government and private sector participation?
Well, I'm a strong believer in the cooperation. That is also why I set up the Innovation Council, where government representatives, ministers, together with business leaders, together with civil society, academia, where we cooperate and discuss what do we need to do, how do we need to act to make sure that the country is developed in the right direction, in the best way we can. So the interaction between the private sector and the public sector is very, very important. And we want to make sure that the business climate is the best we can deliver, of course, in Sweden, because we need the investment. But it's not only about cutting taxes. It is also about showing companies that we have well-educated people in Sweden. That is the most important thing in the global economy. When we are competing with other companies, we need to show that we have well-educated people. So that is an important ingredient in all this.
You were talking about drawing in investments into Sweden. We've talked about the kind of investments that Sweden can make in India, or Swedish companies can make in India. But what about the other way around? Where would you like to see investments from India coming in? Any sectors in specific that you would like to focus on?
Well, the manufacturing, as a whole, the manufacturing sector is important. But we also, in Sweden, we need investment in infrastructure, not least. We have a huge challenge ahead of us because we want to develop the train system and other systems connected to transportation. So there's a lot of possibilities for Indian investment in Sweden.
So you've spent about a day and a half in India so far, most of it here in Bombay. You're headed to Pune after this. What's been the experience here in India for you so far?
It has been very good. I know since many years that our two countries enjoy a very good relationship. And I can see that relationship is even stronger, and I can see the possibility of strengthening the relationship. It's a positive experience for me because I also see that so much is happening in India. I read about it, I see on TV, but now I see also in real life that it's so much positive things are happening in India. So I do want to come back and not only stay 2 days, but I would like to come back and stay for a few more days.
Stay for a few more days, but does it match up to what you've read about and the perception that you perhaps came to India with?
Yes, absolutely. Now I can see that real life. And when I discuss with business leaders, both the Swedish and the Indian business leaders, I can see, yes, there is really something going on here that is positive.
Okay, that's good to hear. Any targets that you've set out in terms of bilateral trade in your conversation with the Prime Minister? Where is it that you would like this relationship how would you like this relationship to be measured at the end of the day?
We didn't decide about specific numbers. This is the goal for our trade. No, we didn't do that. But we do see the possibility. I think the most important thing for the governments is to support this development in the best way we can. And we do that. Both governments are very interested, are very active in this process. And I think that is the best we can do.
Okay, that's good to hear. If I may, take you away for a second away from India and Make in India and ask you about another issue that's been dominating the headlines, and that has to do with the UN panel's recommendations as far as Julian Assange is concerned, and saying that the detention has been unlawful. What is the Swedish government's position going to be on this?
Now, we took note of that decision. That is the panel's decision. That is their view. We are, of course, following the Swedish legal system, and it's being dealt with within our legal system, so I do not interfere in that issue. It's totally up to our legal system.
So the UN panel recommendation is, in that sense, not binding?
It's not binding. We have to follow our legal system, of course. All
right. So, Prime Minister, before I let you go, you said that you would like to come back and visit India and stay on in India, perhaps even visit the Taj Mahal, if that could be on the agenda for you. We can all talk about outcomes in the long term, but if I were to ask you about outcomes in the medium term, the short to medium term, what would you like to see happen over the next 12 to 18 months, for instance, to really deepen the engagement between the two countries?
I would see both the development in terms of manufacturing, as I mentioned, the future of the climate issue. We need to take on that. But I also want to deepen our cooperation when it comes to human rights. Mm-hmm. We live in a global economy, a global labor market, and I think we need to, as leaders, be aware of other challenges, and we are aware of that. The Prime Minister Modi and I discussed yesterday, for example, that we need to address the issue of women's rights. Mm-hmm. The fact that all over the world, women are being abused, killed, young girls are being sold. I'm talking about the trafficking. Right. So there's so much evil in that we need to address. And the Prime Minister Modi and I we agreed upon our responsibility to address the issue and make sure that women and girls also have their rights respected. Mm-hmm. And that is something totally different, but it is as important as the other issues.
Prime Minister, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. We wish you the very best of luck with your engagement here in India. Thank you very much for giving us time here on CNBC TV 18, and we hope that the Make in India Week is a big success for the Swedish firms that are participating here.